Yes, guys, part 2 of the mid-season draft videos. This one is going to be targeted at the ready-made players, those players that have been playing in, various state leagues across the country. They're either, I guess, late developers in some ways for some of these players, and then there's others that have even played AFL, they've dropped back to VFL, they're playing really well, and are kind of viewed as someone that can kind of elevate an AFL list or at least help out the depth on some level. So a lot of these ones are going to be more club specific and a lot more injury dependent than the video that I did yesterday, which was kind of more based around young talent and still kind of finding guys that had slipped through the cracks in the draft. So we'll get stuck in. The first player on my list at the moment is Braden Crosley from the Southport VFL side. Now, he's led them to the most recent grand final in 2024 as their number 1 ruck, and he does fit the profile of this kind of modern AFL ruckman, one that's very physically imposing, very combative, contested, can sort of work in a wrestle, work you over, feed those midfielders with those really well-addressed taps, I think is something that he's kind of predominantly good at, but using his strength to do that predominantly. Now, Crosley, compared to some of the top AFL ruckmen, is not as athletic as those guys, but he certainly is as strong. So I think you're talking about teams like Essendon. Richmond are probably sniffing around for a second ruck, although I do expect them as a club to go for somebody probably younger. You've even got a team like West Coast that have struggled with that position as well. So those sorts of teams, if they wanted to bring in a bit of a stopgap, I think particularly Essendon are that club that, running Goldstein at the moment, being able to bring someone in like Crosley, it's probably a little bit more similar to what they had with someone like a Draper, that sort of stand and deliver ruckman. So it probably feeds into their game a little bit more. And of course, they're not going to have to play Todd Goldstein as much. Crosley is a player that, he's got a large amount of work rate to his game. He has been pushing forward and hitting the scoreboard as well. But I think first and foremost with Crosley, you just get a big, physical, competitive ruckman, which is probably the fundamental for the modern game. What he does outside of that would be a bonus. He's probably not the long-term play. I think there's better ruckmen in the younger age group coming through from the list I did yesterday, and potentially a couple more on this list as well. But he would be the one that could probably deliver you performances right here and right now. Crosley's physicality is built around just being that immovable object, so he's really hard to push off the space that he's protecting, and then he can sort of stand and deliver for the midfielders from there. So when he comes up against these guys at the AFL level, there will be players with greater athleticism that can jump over the top of him a little bit, but at least in the physicality, in the contest, he's going to be able to stand pretty strong and at least give you a competitor in there. The next one that's been turning some heads in the VFL is Charlie McCartan from the Geelong VFL side. He's found his home at, I guess it's sort of like a centre-half back position. He's playing a key defensive role, someone that can intercept, and he can distribute the ball a little bit, but predominantly he has been playing as that lockdown defender. He's 194 centimetres. We are talking here Charlie McCartan, the brother of Tom McCartan of Paddy McCartan. So there's some AFL pedigree in there as well. I think the thing that has just stood out to me with him in the games that I've seen, it's his ability to intercept, so give you that offensive threat and play at that size at 194. He can sort of play as this, he's more of a lockdown, but he can play as this sort of hybrid defender, which most of the AFL clubs are looking for at this point in time. They don't want those sort of necessarily pure lockdown defenders all the time. Most sides can only carry one player like that. So the fact that McCartan also has some offensive weapons really helps out. He's only 25 years of age, so he can still give you a little bit in the future as well. I think you got teams like North Melbourne who probably need a bit of a stopgap defender. They've just had troubles in that area with form and high-end talent. I think you're looking at teams like Collingwood even, who lost Reef McInnes early in this season. Do they still need that extra? Maybe not. Maybe they've been able to cover it, but they still could be looking for one of these key tools that's performing at VFL level. Nathan Kruger is a very familiar name to AFL fans, particularly Collingwood fans where he played at the club for a number of seasons. He sort of seemed to be developing, getting games in that side before he was abruptly delisted. So he's gone back to the Geelong VFL side as well, where he accompanies Tom McCarthy in that back part of the ground. He's really playing as a swingman. Sometimes he's playing in the forward half of the ground. Sometimes he's playing behind the ball. But I think where this has impressed and put him on the radar is the fact that he's gone behind the ball. He's been pretty good back there as an interceptor. He's 196 centimetres, so he's a big guy. He's able to play on those bigger bodied key position forwards, which he's been doing at the VFL level. Still only 25 years of age, which did surprise me a little bit when I was doing research for this, but overall, I think if a club is looking for that ready-made defender, I mentioned Collingwood and North Melbourne, but plenty of teams are looking for versatile tools that they can sort of run through their team. You don't always need absolute stars in those defensive key positions. We've seen clubs like Collingwood go for mid-season draft type picks, rookie picks like Mychek and these sorts of players. So he could be one that's very interesting for a club that either needs a stopgap, just needs somebody to come in and play a role for at least the short term, and then they can kind of see where it goes from there. Tom McCarthy is another sort of medium hybrid defender that's getting a lot of attention for the Richmond VFL side. 189 centimetres, so he's sort of naturally a good size. He is often seen in Richmond VFL games kind of sitting off the back of stoppage and then really sort of getting their ball movement game going. He provides a lot of drive and run off that back 50. The work rate is really good. He's pretty good in the air and at ground level, and being at that nice sort of medium size, I think it's a size of player and a position that the team sort of would look to across this mid-season draft. He's got pretty good numbers. He's a pretty good age profile, just 24 years of age. So there's still somewhat some development, but he kind of hits the ground running at the same time. So it's kind of a good time to get him in. 6 games in the VFL so far for around 24 disposals per game. So working really hard and well in that Richmond VFL side. And he's definitely one of the big names, along with probably McCarthy, that have been spoken about the most of these VFL type players. Riley Mason is another key position talent. He's playing footy with the Collingwood VFL side. 195 centimetre, has a little bit of a different story, this guy. So was playing country football fairly recently, I think in the Goulburn Valley Footy League, kicking tons of goals out there. And he looks pretty athletic, this guy. I've seen some clips and a couple of his games, still only 22 years of age. Back in his draft year and that sort of thing, he was playing, I believe, with the Calder Cannons. Then he played with the Coburg VFL side where he didn't get a game. So could be a late developer. At 195, he looks very athletic, very wiry. He's hitting the scoreboard a plenty for the Collingwood VFL side. He's played 5 games, averaging 9 disposals, and he's kicked 13 goals for. So generating plenty of scoreboard involvement. And this one, it probably feeds into the video that I did yesterday a little bit more, where he's a bit more of a talent play. Sort of similar vibes a little bit to Jack Hutchinson from last year, this very athletic country footballer that comes in and plays VFL and just impresses with their athleticism, their courage, their competitiveness when they fly for the ball in the air, which is a large part of being that key position forward. I think a lot of teams could do worse than going for someone like this that has a bit more upside than some of those other ready-made players that like Kruger, where we've already seen him at the VFL level, or McCartan as well. So this one's an interesting pick. I sort of think about clubs that could be after someone like this. I just think any team really that just wants to inject a little bit of talent, see something a little bit different. I think pathways are important to bring players that have had different sorts of avenues to the game, I suppose. You don't want to just get guys that have had that sort of generic talent pathway. So this is a bit of a different one. He's had to sort of graft a little bit in the VFL as well. So I really like that. And he seems to be playing good footy and could impact at the AFL level. I don't think Mason's necessarily going to come in and hit the ground running. You look at someone like a Jack Hutchinson that came into the West Coast side. It took him a little bit of time. I think he started in the VFL, got into the side pretty quickly, but by year 2 now, he's playing some pretty good footy. So you look to 2026, 2027, that's where he could be playing some good stuff at AFL level. The next one I've got is Ajang Coleman from the Port Melbourne Footy Club. He is a 206 centimetre ruckman, still only 23 years of age. So he's a real development option here and a real future ruckman here. I think he's got all the attributes to become a really good AFL ruckman. He's a real physical presence at stoppage. He's able to protect that space, use his physicality in there. And his size, 206 centimetres, that is a very, very tall man. And when you add in the physicality that he has as well, he's really able to protect those areas in the ruck. Now, at the moment, I feel his taps aren't particularly well addressed. So that's something I think he needs to work on, and probably a few football-specific things. I think his spread out of contest isn't particularly dynamic at the moment. So that's something he probably needs to build up as he gets into an AFL club. But I think that he's kind of the perfect in-between player when you look at options like a Crosley, somebody like that can probably come in and hit the ground running. But there's a little bit more upside as well in Coleman that probably isn't there with someone like a Crosley. You're not getting a really, really young ruckman. You're getting someone that looks physically ready to play, but probably just needs to work on some skill-based things. And I think he can have an impact at least as a backup ruckman at AFL. I think he will be a genuine consideration for teams like Essendon that need to have that, primary ruck in there alongside Goldstein. At some point during the season, you look at a team like Richmond, a team like West Coast, both requiring ruckman, and probably would like a pick like this rather than just another ready-made player that doesn't have a lot of upside in their tank. There are a few more names floating about that I need to do a little bit more research on. There's Josh Green from Port Melbourne, brother of Tom. He's a big-bodied mid in a similar vein to his brother, averaging 26 disposals. And he's kicked 3 goals this season in the VFL already. A couple of other names floating around the VFL. You've got Ben Edwards and Flynn Gentile. Ben's from the Sydney VFL. Flynn Gentile from Coburg. He's one that's got a lot of talk in recent years. You do wonder with players that are sub 180 centimetres like that, sort of playing midfield, can they transition to an AFL club? Where do they exactly fit in? I think that's a genuine question. Then you've got a couple of ex-AFL guys playing good footy in Riley Bonner, Darcy McPherson. But again, are you going back to guys like that you've already had a look at AFL level? You've seen them. You'd have to have a pretty specific list need, I think, to go back to players like that. Again, you look at someone like McPherson. He's mid 170 centimetres, doesn't have a lot of athleticism that those modern halfback players have. There's Luke Parks at Williamstown. Brandon Parfitt's overplaying in the waffle, and he's believed to be on the radar by West Coast as well as a midfield stopgap. That'll be an interesting one, and probably with the age profile, makes a little bit of sense for West Coast. He's not, super old. They could play him for a few years in there while some of these younger players develop and while they've got injuries to Elliot Yeo and these types. Lockie Gallant from Williamstown is on the radar. Ben Kennedy. And South Australian ruckman Alex Van Wyk is another one that gets a lot spoken about him. I do have to watch more of these guys play in the VFL as I'm mostly across that talent league football at the moment. So that is a wrap of the ready-made players. I will be doing another mid-season draft video a little bit closer to the date when we just get a bit more information, and I've had a bit of time to sort of watch through the numerous tapes that I need to kind of see these guys, and I can have a little bit more of put my sort of voice to it a little bit more. So that is a wrap for the mid-season draft, this preliminary video. Let me know what you guys think, who you want to see your team draft in the mid-season draft. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.